So in the last video, we talked about a frequency distribution, and we also touched on what a relative frequency distribution is. So just recall that these are the formulas to find each relative frequency distribution values. This is for a proportion, this one's for percent. All right, so let's look at an example. So we looked at this in the last video, this frequency distribution. So all we're doing here is we're converting this to relative frequency. So let's say we want to convert it to percentages, what we would do is we take each of these values and we divide it by the total number of values. So for example, to change the 2 here to its percentage, so relative to everything else, all the frequencies, what percentage does it constitute? Pretty much that's what we're asking. So in this case, we would do 2 divided by 78, which is approximately, let's pull out the calculator. So 2 divided by 78, we'd get that. And then we're going to convert this into a percentage. One way is to move this decimal point 2 times to the right, which is equivalent to multiplying by 100. So I'd get 2.564 ... percent. And let's say that we want to round to 1 decimal place. Usually on MyStatsLab, they'll give you a round off place. In this case, let's round off to 1 decimal place. So the 1 decimal place would be right there. So in this case, as a percentage, this would be 2.6%. All right, so I'm going to continue in that fashion. So for example, the next one would be 33 divided by 78. Again, it's part divided by whole to get each of the proportion, and then you can multiply it by 100% to get the percentage. So this would be 33 divided by 78. And then the next one would be 35 divided by 78, and then 7 divided by 78, and then 1 divided by 78. So I'm going to go back here just to reference what I have so far. So 33 divided by 78, if we move the decimal point 2 times to the right because we're changing this to a percentage, it'd be 42.3%. And then the next one would be, let's see, 35 divided by 78 would be 44.9%. Let's move that over, so 44.9%. And then for this one, 7 over 78. If we move this decimal point 2 times to the right, let's see, we'd get the 9 here. We're going to round the 9 up, right? The 7 increases the 9 to a 10, and then that causes a ripple effect, which would give us 9.0%. And then lastly, 1 over 78 would be, again, move this decimal point 2 times to the right. We'd get 1 point. The 8 here increases the 2 to a 3. So we have 1.3%. Okay, so pretty much what we just did is we took a frequency distribution. Frequency distribution shows the frequencies, and then we converted it to a relative frequency distribution, which shows each of the frequencies for each of the different classes as percentages. And if we add up all of these, think about what we should get down here. What will we always get when we add up all the percentages? We'd always get 100%. Sometimes because of rounding, so if you were to add up all these percentages, you may be a little bit off. And in fact, if you added up all of these, you'd get 100.1%, which is okay. Because of rounding, you may be slightly above or slightly below, depending on certain things. So that's relative frequency. using percentages. Sometimes they're going to ask you for decimal numbers. So if that's the case, then you would put the decimal numbers. And instead of the sum adding to 100%, you should get 1. All right. So let's do one more problem. And this problem is a problem on my stats lab, which students tend to get a lot of, have a struggle with. So this problem here is asking you to construct a relative frequency distribution, given that this is the frequency distribution. So this problem is a bit, you'd have to understand how to read these. So we actually have two tables, if you will. So this table is for the non-filtered cigarettes, and this table is for the filtered cigarettes. So these are the frequencies for the amount of tar in each of the non-filtered cigarettes, and these are the frequencies for the filtered cigarettes. All right, so one thing that you have to realize is if it doesn't, if there's like no reading for a class, so for example, for the non-filtered, we don't have any frequencies for 3 to 8, the class 3 to 8 milligrams tar. We're going to assume that it's 0. So when you're changing it to relative frequency, you're assuming that the frequency is 0, and you're going to take 0 and divide it by the total number of values. So that's the first thing we need to know. We need to figure out how many total values are there. So in this case, we're going to add up all of these values, and what you're going to find is you're going to get 25. If we do the same here, so you're also going to get 25 if you add up this column. Okay, so now on to relative frequency. So this column is the relative frequency for the non-filtered cigarettes. So over here in this column, or in that table, we realize that there's nothing for 3 to 8 milligrams, so we're going to assume it's 0. So to find this percentage, we do 0 divided by 25. So 0 divided by anything is always 0. So anytime we don't have anything, we're just going to assume that it's going to be 0. So likewise, this class is going to be 0%. And then when we get to 15 to 20 class, then we start to get some frequencies. So here we're going to do 1 over 25, which is 0.04, which is 4%. So we're going to put a 4 right here. And then the next one would be the 21 to 26 would be 2 over 25, which is 0.08, which is 8%. And then for the 27 to 30 class, we have 13. So that'd be 13 over 25, which is, so let's take the calculator, 13 divided by 25, 52.52, which is 52%. And we just continue in that fashion. So for example, the next one would be 7 divided by 25, which would be 28%, and then 2 divided by 25, which would be 8%. And again, if you add up all these values, you should get 100%. So let's just try that. There we go. All right, so we would do that with this table. So for this table, you'll realize that with the filtered cigarettes, the tar content for the class 3 to 8, you have a 1, so that's going to be 1 divided by 25, and then the next one would be 3 divided by 25, and then 5 divided by 25 for this one, and then 16 divided by 25 for this class. These, notice that for these classes, they don't show up here, so we're going to assume that they're all zeros. So we're going to put zeros here as well. And that's how you do this problem. All right, so if there's still any confusion, please let me know.